Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto, Willies, your host. Today we are honored to have Alan Morris. Alan Morris is a policy director of the National LGBTQ Task Force. My brother, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. I'm a little tired because programming has been several days of a lot of, community and learning, but getting through it. And also with that, Congress is crazy right now.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of work to do, and especially given the existential times that we live in with what could possibly happen if we don't do our job.
Exactly.
Now, tell me a little bit about your organization.
So we've been around for now 51 years. We are a civil rights organization. We often like to say that we are the progressive voice of the LGBTQ movement and the LGBTQ voice of the progressive movement. That's a lot of words. But really and truly, we are here to move and shake in certain spaces and places that a lot of people don't necessarily think about. And that's often at an intersection. So when you think about Black folks, how are we showing up for Black LGBTQ immigrants?
Right.
When we talk about trans people, how are we showing up for trans people that are having to deal with healthcare issues, trans folks that actually are middle class and they now have to deal with, healthcare issues. So we look at all these different intersections and figure out how we can show up and how we can push, our movement, but also Congress and the president in a way that gives us equity.
Now, there's something interesting that you said. There's something interesting that you said. You consider yourself the progressive voice of the LGBTQ movement.
Correct.
Why is it that it needs a progressive voice? I know the answer, but I think people have to get honest about it. And that is, before I let you answer, the same ills that's in the population in the aggregate exist within the finite space of the LGBTQ community, meaning there's racism, there's sexism, there are all the isms as well within that community. Go ahead and expand on that.
I think, I've only been on staff for a little over a year now, so I'm still learning what that means when they say we're the progressive voice. But what I can bring to that is when we are looking at what's happening within the movement, how can we be the bridge, right? How can we look at what are the larger issues, and how are we ensuring that everyone is considered and there's not any sort of bickering or fighting? Not to say that bickering or fighting doesn't get to a resolve, because sometimes that's what it's good for, right? But what I've noticed is when we say we're progressive, we're looking at how can we talk about things that are impacting our communities and say, how can we get to the other side? For example, religion is being used in all these different ways to spew hate, to cause division, to pit communities against one another. What can we do as a task force to bring those faith leaders to the forefront to talk about what is at stake and how we all have to be together? And that's something that not many orgs are doing right now.
And your organization is doing that.
And our org is doing that.
So you're trying to centralize on these issues, whereas many other LGBTQ organizations are probably focused just on that subject.
Yes, for sure, definitely.
Well, that is good to know. So tell me, where do we go from here? What's your intent? How do you intend to mobilize? How do you intend to fuse these different movements?
I don't know where we go from here. I'm going to be honest, because in this moment, the goal is to motivate people to get out and vote, but we can't motivate people without hearing and listening to them, right? And we have to listen with intention. So for me, it's having the conversation with my colleagues and saying, hey, if we go into this local community, how are we sitting down, speaking with them, and then taking what they tell us and move it through the movement to say, this state is going through this, and we need y'all to do this to make things better for them, right?
Right.
A lot of people are not motivated to vote, and a lot of that has to do with the fear mongering, also just the overall disappointment coming out of the administration. But also there's a lot of misinformation. So when you see publications consistently talk about all the negative aspects and don't discuss where we're winning, then people get discouraged. But like something that we're good at doing is telling our movement we're winning. Like, they wouldn't be coming after us if they didn't know that we were powerful. They would not be coming after us if they didn't know that when we all come together, we move shit and we move shit through. Wait, can we cuss?
Not really, but I'll cut that out.
Okay. We move the needle when we're all standing in lockstep or just in lockstep, you know? And so I think for me, where we go from here is how can we have more intentional conversations across various movements? How can we bring legacy civil rights organizations into our sphere and figure out why is it so many of your staff identify as LGBTQ, but you're not centering the needs of LGBTQ people, right? How can we go to repro orgs and say, hey, a attack on repro is also a attack on overall healthcare, which is also a attack on trans healthcare. So what can we do to come together to have the same message so we can all fight it, right? Ever since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, we are seeing a trickling down of so many protections being literally reversed.
Right.
And so what can we do to bring these movements together to say, hey, without us standing in solidarity, then things will not move.
Well,
And
that is very important. And the reality is the answer is simple. Implementation is hard.
Mm-hmm.
The most important thing is just like people have to learn to be selfless in these selfless when they're united. Mm-hmm. Organizations are going to have to learn as well to be not insular. In mm-hmm. other words, that it's time to stop thinking there's turf to be protected as opposed to turf to be shared.
Right, definitely.
And when we get there, that may be a point. Give me a closer.
Well, I want people to also know and understand that this election, often we hear it's the lesser of two evils, or this is the most important election of our lifetime. But I want people to consider, when you look to the left and right of you, people are impacted. When you look in your family relationships, something that is happening within these states and on Congress, just 30 miles away, impacts someone that you love. So when you show up to the polls, you should show up for them, even if you don't see that impact. Even if there's something there where you're like, okay, I have good health insurance. I don't need to worry about, all these other facets that's going to determine how I show up. But someone that you love does. So you should show up with love at the polls and vote for them, right? And I think that's the message that needs to be, on the larger screen, is like, a lot of people aren't happy with both candidates. Both of them have their things. But when you think about
Go ahead.
When you think about where we are with Joseph Robinette is doing something that a lot of presidents do, and that's pander to what is either in the middle or where he can get votes that he haven't often gotten them. And that's not necessarily serving him. And we've had conversations with the administration to ensure that people understand that the overall goal is a president that is pro-equality and that is invested in equity for everyone.
Alan Morris, Policy Director of the National LGBTQ Task Force. Thank you kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number 1, subscribe to our channel. And number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.